Board of Supervisors workshop meeting, February 3rd at 12 p.m. We'll jump right into our business agenda for today. Number one being a presentation and discussion on self-benefits.
And with us today is Ernie Martinelli, who is our benefits broker, and he's going to do a little bit of education on the subject.
Certainly, I appreciate if you don't cheat with the right. So I want to start on the left-hand side here. This is a self-funding presentation, and before I get into the presentation, do I stand? Do I sit? Doesn't matter. Okay. I just want to introduce myself as Ernie Martinelli, as Bobby had said, and I've been working with Uwchlan Township probably since 2003. We've maintained a high level of coverage with Independence Blue Cross. Every year, we kind of beat them up on a renewal. I have some statistics here that show that the average over the last 6 years has been like 2.73%, which is outstanding. And I think Sue will also confirm that you've gotten some medical loss ratio checks back that have more than covered the increases. So it's been running, but with the new sheriff in town with Bobby, he said to me, he goes, we should look at some other alternatives. And I said, absolutely. I said, self-funding could be a great alternative. The only negative that we have is that we don't know what claims are lurking out there, because with Blue Cross, you have to have over 300 insured in order for them to give you any type of claims data. So we have no idea what the claims data looks like, but there's certain things that we look at when you're considering self-funding that if it makes sense from a financial standpoint, it becomes what they call a no-brainer. And I think as I get through this presentation, I'll get to the no-brainer part later. So if you look at the left-hand side, there's a piece that starts out with the Pennsylvania Municipal Health Insurance Company. So basically what we're going to look to do is put you into a self-funded program with other municipalities, which I think is a great alternative, because now what we're doing is we're spreading the risk amongst, I think there's 290 other municipalities in this fund. So they're not just putting Uwchlan Township under the microscope, you're going to be part of a broader band. So if you go to page 3, you'll see that the board of directors comprises of 9 PMHC members. There's 290 municipalities in here. We can tap into a number of high-profile carriers, such as Independence Blue Cross, United Healthcare, or Highmark. The one that Bobby and I were looking at was Highmark, which is Blue Cross. So your employees wouldn't see any disruption in service from the providers. It would be the same provider network that they currently have. There's no lasers. What does that mean? So if you're in a self-funding program and you have an individual that you're covering who has high claims, they can say, we're not going to cover the first 200, 300,000 of this person's claims because they're going to be ongoing. I have a case now that I handle for a client of mine. We have a young child that runs through about $500,000 a year in medical bills. Most of it's prescriptions, very expensive prescriptions that lays it at $450,000, which means that the company is responsible for the first $450,000. So what's nice about this program is that there's no lasers whatsoever. So if you do have some sick individuals, we don't have to worry about them. They're going to give you 100% of your claims data and financial transparency, which is great. So we're going to know exactly what the claims looks like from a perspective of what's out there and how many claims there are. They'll go down to 15 lives. Not that that's a problem for Uwchlan Township, but they'll go down to 15 lives. We go to the next page. Just some bullet points on lowest possible pricing for your employees. They provide safety for the members, continuing education, and excellent customer service. On page 5, we talk about the benefits of the Pennsylvania Municipal Health Insurance Cooperative. Superior risk protection, no lasers at renewal that I just touched on, no punitive pricing, guaranteed renewables. Independent pricing of stop loss by Benecon. The TPA, or the third-party administrator we're going to use, is Benecon, and they're the ones that put this cooperative together. They put caps on renewal rates, and they also have loss and claim funds. You'll see stop loss coordination by Benecon. And basically what they want you to do is to focus on cost containment solutions amongst your employees, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Any questions so far? Please stop me if I'm rambling too fast. The next piece of this, you'll see the rates. There's claim fund experience. They look at healthcare trend and inflation, stop loss costs, administrative costs, healthcare reform issues. The pricing is going to be set by Benecon actuaries and final approval by their stop loss carrier. This next page, page 7, kind of gives you the ins and outs of self-funding. You'll notice that with self-funding, you have your fixed cost, you have your claims cost, and you have a maximum liability. So if you are going to consider this, we will know when we put a plan in place what our maximum liability cost is. They will tell us what your specific deductible is. In this case here, we're quoting $50,000. So what that means is the first $50,000 of any claims is going to be the responsibility of Uwchlan Township. Anything over $50,000, the stop loss carrier kicks in. So not only do you have a specific deductible, you also have what they call an aggregate deductible. Once you hit that aggregate deductible, which is the maximum liability, you're done. And you'll see in a moment that when you look at what you're paying now, what the maximum liability cost would be with self-funding, when those two numbers are close, it falls into that no-brainer category that I was referencing earlier. So here you'll see at the very top of the stack, there's your administrative cost. Then you have your specific stop loss and your aggregate stop loss, which make up about 26.4% of your costs. Then 73.7% is your claims. You have your claim fund corridor, your cost sharing with the other municipalities, and your aggregate stop loss. Then you'll have your member surplus, which you have a great year. You'll see a lot of money there. If you have an expected year, you'll still save. If your claim fund's exhausted, you might be slightly higher than if you're fully insured. Make sense? Any questions? The other thing with self-funding is you basically have a clean canvas. You can design the benefits any way that you want. I know coming in here since 2003 or whatever year it was, your benefits are fantastic. I don't know that they could get any better. I mean, Bobby will tell you when he came here, he was pretty surprised at how rich the benefits are. So the benefits are magnificent. I don't know that you can make them any better. But if you wanted to, you could. And one of the things that we've talked about in some of our prior meetings is that we can get away from having some of the self-funding done and just have them subsidized by the program. Any questions on the model here? Benecon also uses a company called Connect Care 3 Benefits, and they have services like patient advocacy that helps with bills and things like that. Nurse navigation, if somebody gets sick, they kind of walk them through finding specialists, where's the best place to get that care. Chronic disease management, I think that's critical, because if you have people with, high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, you want to make sure that your employees and their dependents are doing the right care management to make sure that that claim doesn't become any worse than it already is. You don't want that high blood pressure to become a heart attack. You don't want that high cholesterol to become a heart attack. Nutrition education and tobacco cessation. And then on the last page, you'll see that there's partnering with employees, the wellness programs. I mean, one of the things that, Blue Cross does offer wellness programs. I'm not sure how many people are taking advantage of it, but when you do self-funding, your claims are your expense. So you would probably want to promote a wellness program, an incentive program, a program for evaluation of claims and things of that nature. So if we want to get to the tail of the tape, if you go to the page on the other side, this basically tells us that currently with Independence Blue Cross, we are spending approximately $2.2 million. Does everybody see that? So if we look at the Pennsylvania Municipal Health Insurance Cooperative, you're going to have your fixed costs, which are your stop loss premiums at 253,000, your specific premiums of 295, and your admin and procure premiums of another 49. So you're going to have under $600,000 of fixed costs. That's about 27% of the total bill. The other 73% is going to be 100% of your claims. So basically, you're going to have $1.63 million of claims. If you look at the very bottom under the PMHIC funding, you'll see that if you hit your expected, they have actuaries that kind of look at your census and say, okay, looking at this, the demographics of this group, we think that your expected claims are going to be X and that you should have a surplus of about 265,000 if you hit expected. If you hit maximum claims liability, which is your aggregate attachment point, the additional cost to Uwchlan Township would be under $6,000. So the $64 question becomes, would you spend $6,000 with an attempt to try to save $265,000? Now, the no-brainer would be if that maximum exposure was equal to or less than what you're spending now. It's slightly higher, but the fact that it's so close to what you're spending now, and you could have a reduction in cost of approximately $265,000, I think is fantastic. Now, the negative, as I mentioned earlier, is we don't know what's out there, but we do know that any claims that are out there are going to be capped at $50,000 on each specific deductible. So anybody that goes over $50,000, your exposure is done. Stop loss carrier kicks in. Questions?
What are the differences in the appropriate expenses for the children's center? So we're talking about would these numbers change?
At renewal time, they're going to change. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, this is looking at it with your June 2024 rates. We're going to get new rates in June of 2025 from Blue Cross. So the current funding with Blue Cross will change, and so will the self-funding rates will change. They always want to quote it based upon the effective date.
Was there a difference? Looking at it, like time or
It's hard for me to guesstimate that. Our renewals average over the last 6 years about 2.73%. I would say our renewal probably will come in somewhere between, probably will start out around 12%, 10 to 12% is what I'm seeing. But this is, June is going to be second quarter. So I haven't seen second quarter rates out yet. So I don't know what that's going to be, but I would estimate 8 to 10%. Blue Cross isn't going to want to lose your business, I can tell you that, because every year they've come out with 12 to 15% rate increases, and I've been successful negotiating it down to 2%, 3%, 5%. So they don't want to see $2.2 million walk out the door. So they get aggressive and try to do whatever they can to maintain the business. But the problem is, if your claims are less than $1.6 million, you're leaving a lot of money on the table, is the problem. So does that answer your question, Bill? So there will be a whole new set of numbers come June. I'll probably get those numbers sometime in the beginning of April. And as soon as I have those numbers, I'll get the self-funded numbers updated as well. And then we could reconvene and see if they're as close as they are here.
So whether we're looking at it from a renewal of the fully, the IVX full insured, or we're looking at it from whether it's Highmark or IVX on the self-insured side, I think there's a reasonable likelihood that they're going to be fairly aggressive on some of the rates where they have the flexibility. The other piece to it is, to Ernie's point, they're coming in initially 10, 12, 15% renewals. We're able to negotiate that down to 2 2, 3, 5%, which probably means that in reality, we're running under where they kind of expected. So effectively, what that 265,000 in savings represents is profit that the insurance company is making off of the risk associated with insurance. And we kind of wanted to take a look, you know, as Ernie said, and I think as I've said to all of you, there is risk associated with changing the funding model, but there's also an opportunity for the township to receive the savings associated with what we think are pretty good claims experience versus the insurance company.
The other thing with self-funding too that I want to make you aware of is that from a cash flow perspective, it really improves your cash flow when you start with self-funding, because if you think about it, if you walk into a hospital today, you may not see that bill for 60 or 90 days, which means it's not going to hit the insurance company for 60 or 90 days. So the first 3 months of self-funding, you're only paying your fixed costs. So there's not a lot of claims in the first 3 months. So it dramatically improves your cash flow, at least for the first 3 months of the start of it, because there's no claims that are hitting and you're only paying your fixed cost. And if you look at your fixed cost, you're comparing paying less than 600,000 to 2.2 million. So it's a dramatic improvement of that. The other thing they talk about and I hope I'm not going down the wrong road here, but when they talk about self-funding, they want your employees to make decisions as to what's the best way for me to get this care. Now, your benefits are so rich, there's not a whole lot of decisions to make because it's a $5 office visit. You know, if I sneeze, I might run to the doctor's because it's going to cost me $5 to see if it's a problem. Whereas if you had a $35 or $40 copay, they talk about that because in the presentation, it talked about cost containment. There's other ways you can contain cost by doing wellness programs, trying to make sure people are healthy. You can do, nutritional services and things of that nature. And you can outsource that stuff to different vendors as well. So the health of your employees really has a dramatic impact on how much you're paying in a self-funded type of plan.
Do you remember on how much they bring to the wall, to the anti,
I've seen studies where the ROI on wellness programs might be like 3 to 1. For every dollar you spend, you might save $3. But that means you have to have somebody that implements it and works it on a regular basis. It's time consuming, and I know a lot of times if your staff is busy every day, that is like almost another part-time employee to run a wellness program. I mean, I've had some clients, they do like contests, they like step contest. You divide up, the township in different, maybe you have your streets department, office department, police, who has the most steps in a month and things like that, weight loss programs, things of that nature. Right. Right. They say the return is somewhere around 3 to 1, assuming that you get your people engaged. That's the toughest part, getting people engaged.
The other point that I just want to be very touched on this, the way that it works right now, Sue spends a considerable amount of her time a week processing reimbursements. So, we have to help manage costs on the way we currently fund benefits. We have a set copay. You pay that to the doctor, and then you're able to bring in and get reimbursed. Sue spends a considerable amount of time processing all those reimbursements. By having the flexibility of the self-funding model, we have an opportunity to eliminate that. So basically bring those copays back to where they used to be. And then Sue doesn't have to process that and then rely on the insurance company making the eligibility decision. The other piece of that is if we end up staying in our current funding model, there is a different program that we've looked at where that we would take that responsibility away from Sue. Basically, everybody would get a card, and they would use that card and take care of figuring out the right days work, everything. So part of this is one way or another trying to reduce the workload on Sue in the process of those reimbursements.
So that'll give her time to manage the wellness program.
Working on 5-mile runs for lunch.
Any questions? I think the biggest variable, and Bobby and I have kicked this around, is just not knowing what your claims experience looks like. And Blue Cross has told me on the last couple of renewals that your medical loss ratio, which is basically premiums collected versus claims paid, is less than 100%. So as Bobby said, there's some fat at these carriers. If you look at the loss ratio checks that you've gotten back, that's basically Blue Cross's book of business. When it's under 80%, they're obligated by law that they have to refund that money. So you've gotten some, decent checks back because of that. So their book of business typically runs pretty well. I mean, they always try to come out with a 10 to 12% rate increase to see who's going to swallow it. And then we've got to go back and get competitive information, beat them up, and then they come down to a more reasonable number. That's it. That was pretty easy. Hopefully it was meaningful. Time well spent.
Yeah, so, we kind of wanted to just plant the seed, provide a little bit of education on it, and then as we start the renewal process, we're going to look at all the options and come back at some point and have some recommendations. And Yeah.
Citizen and anyone, but right at the beginning, so it's $5 often. They go right, they pay $5. They don't have to bring receipts in anymore, put prescriptions and things of that nature. It also becomes a little bit easier for your employees.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Well, to.
We had talked about the pension investment committee before and had some feedback. I think we've incorporated that. The idea here is that we have a committee that's a little more actively involved with management of the pension system, made up of Sue, myself, and a representative from the police association. We have that the Board of Supervisors are ex officio members and always welcome to be part of that. This is an advisory group, so it's taking a look at performance and making recommendations. Ultimately, the board is the final decision maker on that. So just wanted to see if there was any feedback on this, or if we might advance it to the business meeting for consideration. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, the board should be at the end of the day, the board is the decision maker on all of the pension systems. And so this group would be advisory and the decisions would actually be coming to the board for the board to make. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Even though all 3 supervisors are sufficient, we'd have to decide what the one is going to show up. Because that would certainly be deliberative.
We talked to Mark about that. Probably from the board's perspective, it would be more educational, and any decisions that actually had to happen would be done in a public meeting and that deliberation would happen. Yeah, yeah, correct, correct. Yeah. Again, you saw this. We talked about this in January. Made some edits based on feedback from the three of you last month. For the Rossi master plan, we included and update the tri-party agreement. Um, I think Bill wanted to see a little bit more concrete uh, with regard to the rewrite of the zoning ordinance, and so we threw in there. We specifically focus, aside from the overall zoning rewrite, we would specifically be focused on parking, warehouses, and solar, trying to get those three accomplished this year. And then the final one was achievement of GFOE Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, which is our financial statements, and then their Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. And again, if we hit 80% of these, it's in my mind a really good day. So yeah. So I think I mentioned we're going through the process of reviewing all of the ordinances outside of Saldo and zoning. Those are separate projects. Um, so we're starting at the top. First one was general provisions, and we looked through that. Didn't really have any changes. And then the next one was Chapter 7, which is on ambulance services. Had Mark look at these, staff looked at these. We also sent the ambulance services one to Uwchlan Ambulance. On general provisions, no one had any real substantive change there. It was fine as is. On ambulance services, no one knows why this exists, including Uwchlan Ambulance. And so the recommendation would actually be to repeal this ordinance and take it off the books. So wasn't sure if in looking at these two ordinances, any of you had any other or different of opinions, but yeah. No. Yeah, what's interesting is this is really, it's almost like they can charge for non-emergencies, but again, like it is. And frankly, like I called Uwchlan Ambulance and I said, "Hey, about this ordinance," and they said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." Like they didn't even know that this ordinance existed. We checked with other townships surrounding us within Uwchlan's service area. No one else has this ordinance. 2001. So yeah, yeah. So we'll have the usual reports. We have permission to advertise a four-way stop sign ordinance for Glendale Road and Allen Drive. We had a traffic study performed there. There's a sight distance issue, which justifies the placement of a four-way stop sign. We have the permission to advertise repeal of Chapter 7 ambulance services. We have an ordinance setting the speed limit for Cherie Boulevard at 30 miles an hour. Right now on the books, it's 35. And that's a recommendation from our traffic engineer based on the improvements that have taken place on Cherie Boulevard. We will likely have a final presentation on the Shimona Peck Nature Play. I actually need to confirm that with Ed Therakoff, our landscape designer. But then we'll have a resolution approving an application for the county park grant program for Shimona Peck Nature Play, going after about $164,000 there. We'll have an agreement with Uwchlan Ambulance for the provision of emergency medical services and funding of those services. We expect to have 2 bid awards, one for the street sweeping and one for repairs to the lower road garage, the storage building foundation. Have a resolution on creation of a pension investment committee, acknowledging Calvary Chapel of Chester Springs, the preliminary and final land development plan submission. We may or may not have an amendment to the restrictive covenants for the shops at Lineville Station. We're going back and forth. It sounds like we can actually just handle that administratively, so we may go that route. We'll see. And then the last thing is acknowledgement. We will have acknowledgement of receipt of a conditional use application and an associated extension request for Rockwell Downingtown LLC. And then after the meeting, we'll have the conditional use hearing for the self-storage Laborio Louvers at 339 West Uwchlan. Yeah.
General public.
It's a conditional use application.
Good question, put an email about, the grants. I think I would make it as I don't know, or something to this. I just want to kind of, are we affected by any grant losses? Is there anything?
Not yet. And my understanding is that a court blocked that and then the memo was rescinded. I don't think, aside from the disaster grants, the township's not party to any direct federal grant. So if anything, it would be, my guess is the impact to the township would be more around state grants being smaller. The total pot of money being available would be smaller without the federal assistance.